On January 11th, 2013, the internet went quiet. Not the servers, not the traffic, the community, the soul of the machine. In a small apartment in Brooklyn, New York, the body of Aaron Swartz was found. He was 26 years old. The news rippled outwards, not like a shockwave, but like a sickening, cold dread. It didn't make sense. This was Aaron Swartz, the prodigy, the internet's own boy, a mind that seemed to operate on a different frequency. He had co-created RSS at 14, making podcasts and blogs possible. He was a co-owner of Reddit, one of the web's largest communities. He was a millionaire, at least on paper. He was a digital folk hero who had just 1 year earlier led an online revolution that defeated the SOPA PIPA censorship bills, a victory that saw the entire U.S. Congress back down. He was David, and he had just slain Goliath. So why, at the moment of his greatest influence, did he take his own life? The answer wasn't simple. It wasn't a single act of despair. His death was the final move in a game he had been forced to play for 2 solid years, a game where the opponent was the United States government. The Department of Justice, with its limitless resources, had set its sights on this 26-year-old. They had charged him with 13 felonies. They were threatening him with 35 years in a federal prison and over $1 million in fines. His crime? He downloaded academic articles. This is not just the story of a tragic suicide. This is the story of a 21st century witch hunt. It's the story of a brilliant mind that saw the future and a 19th century legal system that was terrified of it. It's the story of what happens when a Goliath, wounded in its pride, decides to crush the David who dared to challenge it. This is the story of Aaron Swartz and the price he paid for trying to set information free. To understand the tragedy of Aaron Swartz, you must first understand his mind. It was, by all accounts, extraordinary. Born in 1986, Aaron was a child of the early internet. While other kids were playing video games, Aaron was reading the source code. He wasn't just a user, he was a builder. He learned to read at 3. By the time he was in elementary school, he was teaching his older brothers how to code. His family recalls him being constantly, almost painfully, inquisitive. He didn't just ask what, he asked why and why not. He didn't see the world as a set of fixed rules. He saw it as a system full of bugs and inefficiencies waiting to be debugged. At 13, he created The Info, a user-generated encyclopedia. It was, for all intents and purposes, Wikipedia before Wikipedia. He won the Ars Digita Prize, a competition for young web developers. The prize? A trip to MIT. He stood among PhD students and Silicon Valley luminaries, a small teenager in an oversized suit, already an equal. At 14, he joined a working group of elite programmers crafting the future of the web. This wasn't a kids' club. This was the group defining RSS, really simple syndication. Aaron wasn't just a participant. He became a co-author of the RSS 1.0 specification. Think about that. If you've ever subscribed to a podcast, if you've ever used an RSS feed, you have used technology a 14-year-old helped design. He was building the plumbing of the modern internet before he was old enough to drive.
The conventional path was laid out for him. Stanford University, but the path bored him. He was a mind built for sprinting, and academia felt like a slow crawl. He dropped out after 1 year. As he famously wrote, "That school thing, I'm not entirely sure it works." He was drawn to action. He linked up with a small startup called Reddit. His company, Infogani, merged with theirs. Aaron became a co-founder and a key architect of the site that would become the front page of the Internet. When Condé Nast, the media giant, bought Reddit, Aaron became wealthy. He was barely 20 years old. He had completed the Silicon Valley dream, but it left him empty. He hated the office culture. He was repulsed by the focus on monetization, on user engagement metrics and ad revenue. He didn't care about making money. He cared about changing things. His colleague and friend, Steve Huffman, recalled, Aaron didn't understand why he had to do things he didn't want to do. It wasn't arrogance, it was purity. Aaron saw a world filled with urgent, solvable problems. Why was anyone wasting time on banner ads when the systems of knowledge and power were broken? He sold his stake in Reddit. He walked away from the millions, from the Silicon Valley fame, and went searching for a fight that mattered.
Aaron moved from the world of code to the world of activism. He found a mentor in Lawrence Lessig, the legendary Harvard law professor and founder of Creative Commons. Lessig was fighting to reform copyright law, arguing that our culture was being suffocated by outdated rules. In Lessig, Aaron found a philosophical father. He saw that the bugs in the system weren't just in code, they were in law. Aaron's first major battle was with PACER. PACER, which stands for Public Access to Court Electronic Records, is the online database for the U.S. federal courts. It contains all public filings, court opinions, and legal precedents. This is unequivocally public information, created by our government, paid for by our tax dollars. But the government was charging 10 cents per page to access it. To Aaron, this was an outrage. This wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a toll booth on the road to justice. It meant that only wealthy law firms could afford to do comprehensive legal research. It kept the law, the people's law, hidden from the people. The 10-cent fee supposedly covered the cost of the servers, but PACER was generating over $100 million a year in profit, funneled back into the court system for unrelated projects. Aaron saw the bug, and he decided to fix it. In 2008, as part of a free PACER initiative, he wrote a small script. He downloaded 20 million pages of public court documents, nearly 2.7 million individual files, and uploaded them for free public access. This was David walking up to Goliath's treasury and handing the gold back to the citizens. Goliath noticed. The FBI launched a full-scale investigation. They put him under surveillance. They tapped his phones. They treated a 22-year-old activist like a foreign spy. As Aaron later wrote, they tracked my IMs, my physical location, my text messages, my emails. They planted a roving bug in my car, which recorded all the conversations. They subpoenaed my school records, my financial records, my phone records, my credit reports, for downloading public documents. The investigation terrified him. It was his first taste of the system's crushing, disproportionate power. But in the end, the Justice Department quietly dropped the case. No charges were filed. The documents were, after all, public. Aaron had won, but he had also made a powerful enemy, and he had learned a dangerous lesson. The government doesn't just guard its secrets, it guards its data, even the public data. This battle hardened him. It convinced him that his path was the right one. The system wouldn't fix itself. You had to make it. He co-founded Demand Progress, an online advocacy group that would become a political powerhouse. He was building an army, and he was looking for his next target.
If PACER was a walled garden, JSTOR was a fortress. JSTOR, or Journal Storage, is a digital library of academic journals, books, and primary sources. It is the repository of a vast portion of human knowledge. Scientific breakthroughs, historical analysis, sociological studies. It's all there, and it's all locked behind a brutal paywall. A single article can cost $30 or $40. University subscriptions cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. To Aaron, this was the same bug as PACER, but magnified. This was knowledge, often funded by public grants, written by academics and peer-reviewed for free by other academics, being sold back to the public at an exorbitant price. Students at poor universities couldn't access it. Researchers in developing countries couldn't access it. A curious citizen couldn't access it. It was a tax on human curiosity. In 2010, Aaron, now a research fellow at Harvard, turned his attention to MIT. MIT, the temple of open courseware and technological progress. Ironically, MIT's campus network was notoriously open. Aaron saw this not as a flaw, but as a feature, a testament to the academic spirit of sharing. His plan was simple. He would download a massive trove of articles from JSTOR, not to sell, not to profit, but to release them into the wild, to liberate them. He wrote a simple script, named it keepgrabbing.py. He went to the MIT campus. He found an unlocked network closet in the basement of Building 16. It was not a high-tech heist. It was a dusty, forgotten room filled with wires and switches. He plugged in his laptop, set the script to run, and left. Over the next few weeks, the script worked. It downloaded millions of articles. JSTOR noticed the unusual traffic. They blocked the IP address. Aaron would return, spoof a new address, and continue. This wasn't a malicious hack. There was no data damage, no breach of security. It was a bulk download, a violation of JSTOR's terms of service. It was, in essence, the digital equivalent of checking out too many library books. JSTOR and MIT, annoyed, decided to find the culprit. They installed a motion-activated video camera in the closet. The footage they captured is heartbreaking in its simplicity. It's just Aaron, a young man in a hoodie and a bicycle helmet, which he used to hide his face, swapping out a hard drive. He doesn't look like a master criminal. He looks like a college kid in a computer lab. On January 6, 2011, Aaron returned to the closet one last time. As he left, MIT campus police and U.S. Secret Service agents were waiting for him. The arrest was confusing. Aaron initially thought it was a prank. He was on MIT campus, a hub of intellectual curiosity. He was downloading knowledge. But the men arresting him weren't academics. They were federal agents, and they didn't see a prodigy. They saw a cyber terrorist. The case should have ended there. It was a dispute between a private company, JSTOR, and a young activist. Within days, JSTOR, to their credit, realized who Aaron was and what he stood for. They got their data back. Aaron had no intention of releasing it once caught, and they saw no damage had been done. JSTOR released a public statement, quote, "We have no interest in this becoming a legal case." They asked the government, in no uncertain terms, to drop it. MIT, the other victim, also declined to press charges. The victims didn't want a prosecution. The stolen goods were returned. There was no financial damage. This is where the story should have ended. But it didn't. Because this was never about JSTOR. It was about power. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Massachusetts, led by Carmen Ortiz, decided to take the case. The lead prosecutor was Stephen Heyman, a man who specialized in cybercrime and had a reputation for being an aggressive, unyielding hardliner. This was the same office that had investigated Aaron for the Pacer incident. They knew exactly who he was. This was their chance to make an example of him. They had the perfect weapon, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. The CFAA is one of the most notoriously vague and draconian laws on the books. Written in 1986, before the World Wide Web even existed, it was designed to stop hackers from breaking into nuclear missile computers. The law makes exceeding authorized access on a computer network a federal crime. What does that mean? Nobody knows. Have you ever lied about your weight on a dating site? You violated the terms of service. You have exceeded authorized access. Have you ever used your work computer for personal email? Same thing. Under the CFAA, these minor infractions could, in the hands of an ambitious prosecutor, be turned into felonies. And Stephen Heyman was ambitious. The government unsealed its first indictment, 4 felony counts. U.S. Attorney Carmen Ortiz released a statement to the public, framing Aaron as a dangerous digital intruder. Her office declared, quote, "This case alleges that Swartz stole over 4 million articles." Quote, end quote. These are serious charges. Serious charges. For downloading library books. Aaron's legal team was stunned. This was prosecutorial overreach on a massive scale. They assumed it was a scare tactic. But Aaron refused to plead guilty. He refused to be labeled a felon for an act of political protest. He believed he had done nothing morally wrong. His refusal was seen not as integrity, but as defiance, and it enraged the prosecution. So they turned up the heat. In November 2012, the government filed a superseding indictment. They piled on more charges. The new total was 13 felonies: wire fraud, computer fraud, unlawfully obtaining information from a protected computer. They were stacking charges. Each charge carried years in prison. The maximum sentence was 35 years. The fines were over $1 million. Let's be clear. This is the kind of sentence reserved for organized crime bosses, for violent terrorists, for people who steal billions of dollars. The prosecutors argued that what Aaron did was the digital equivalent of breaking into a library, stealing millions of books, and burning them. As lead prosecutor Stephen Heyman stated in court filings, quote, "He broke into a restricted area and downloaded a vast trove of documents. This was not a harmless prank," end quote. They were painting a picture of digital terrorism. And they offered Aaron a deal. If he pled guilty to all 13 felonies, they would recommend a sentence of just 6 months in a low-security prison. It was a mafia tactic. Plead guilty to crimes you didn't commit, or we will destroy your life. This deal was the core of their strategy. They never intended to go to trial. A trial would be risky. They might lose. A jury might actually hear the facts and agree with Aaron. A trial would expose the absurdity of the CFAA. No, they didn't want justice. They wanted a scalp. They wanted to bully him into submission. As his father, Robert Swartz, later said, the government's tactics were a kind of legal torture. They were just grinding him down. Aaron was now trapped. He was a 25-year-old man facing the full, unblinking, limitless power of the U.S. government. His legal bills were skyrocketing, draining his Reddit fortune. He was facing a future where he could be bankrupt, imprisoned, and stripped of his right to vote. And all because he downloaded library books.
Here is the profound, tragic irony of Aaron's life.
While this crushing federal prosecution was happening, mostly in secret, under seal, Aaron was in public, staging the single greatest victory of his life. In 2011, the U.S. Congress introduced two bills, the Stop Online Piracy Act, SOPA, in the House, and the Protect IP Act in the Senate. On the surface, they were anti-piracy bills, backed by Hollywood and the music industry. But Aaron read the text, and he was horrified. The bills would give the government and corporations the power to censor the internet. They could shut down entire websites, like Wikipedia or YouTube or Reddit, if a single user posted a link to copyrighted material. They could block domain names. They could choke off ad revenue. It was the Great Firewall of China, American style. The bills had massive, bipartisan support. They were being fast-tracked. They were considered a done deal. Aaron Swartz, through his organization Demand Progress, went to war. He understood something that the old guard lobbyists in Washington didn't. You could mobilize the internet itself as a political force. He and his team built a grassroots movement. They explained the complex legal text in simple, terrifying terms. They got people to call their representatives. The movement culminated on January 18, 2012. The Internet blackout. Wikipedia went dark. Google blacked out its logo. Reddit and thousands of other sites shut down in protest. The Internet itself, the entire ecosystem, went on strike. It was a revolution. Millions of calls and emails flooded Congress. The political support for the bills didn't just crack, it evaporated overnight. Senators who had co-sponsored the bills were now tripping over themselves to denounce them. Within days, SOPA and PIPA were dead. It was an impossible victory. A small group of activists, led by Aaron Swartz, had faced the most powerful corporate lobbies in the world and the U.S. Congress, and they had won. It was David's slingshot, striking Goliath square between the eyes. Aaron was a hero. He had saved the free internet. But imagine the psychology of the prosecutors back in Boston. This young man they were trying to bully into a 6-month plea deal was at the very same moment publicly humiliating another branch of the U.S. government. Many close to the case believe this was the point of no return. The prosecution was no longer just about JSTOR. It was revenge. It was the system sending a message. You may have won that battle, but you will lose the war. We will make an example of you. We will break you. The prosecution, which had been aggressive before, now became something darker. It became personal.
The victory over SOPA came at a terrible cost. It had drained his energy, but the legal case was draining his life. The 2 years from his arrest to his death were a slow, agonizing grind. He was running out of money. The legal fees were astronomical. He had spent his entire fortune. He was now financially dependent on his family and friends. The system was designed to bankrupt him before he ever saw a courtroom. He was also betrayed, in his view, by an institution he loved, MIT. The university, which prided itself on a culture of disobedience and hacking, which celebrated openness, remained cruelly silent. JSTOR had asked for the case to be dropped. MIT, whose network was used, could have done the same. A single statement from the president of MIT asking the U.S. attorney to stand down would have likely ended the entire ordeal. But MIT refused. They maintained a neutral stance. In a war between a 25-year-old and the U.S. government, neutrality is not neutral. It is a choice. MIT chose to side with the Goliath. Aaron was now isolated. He was fighting the government. He was abandoned by the academic institution he was trying to help. He fell into a deep, crippling depression. His girlfriend, Taryn Steinbrickner-Kaufman, described a man consumed by a miasma of fear. He became paranoid, but as his friends said, it's not paranoia when they are actually out to get you. He couldn't code, he couldn't work, he couldn't sleep. He would sit and weep, overwhelmed by the sheer, unfeeling, bureaucratic cruelty of it all. He felt, as he wrote in his own essays, a profound sense of shame, not because he had done wrong, but because he was a criminal. The label itself was a prison. This is the central tactic of such prosecutions, to destroy your reputation, your finances, and your mental health, so that by the end you are too broken to even fight. In late 2012, the prosecutors offered their final deal: 6 months in prison, plead guilty, and it all goes away. For the prosecutors, this was generous. They felt they were entitled to a conviction. Their office would later insist that their plea offer was, quote, a reasonable resolution for 13 federal felonies. But for Aaron, it was an impossible choice. To accept the deal meant admitting he was a criminal. It meant validating their tactics. It meant agreeing that downloading academic articles was a felony, worthy of prison. It would be a lie. It would be a betrayal of every principle he had ever fought for. If he fought, he faced 35 years. The risk was total annihilation. If he folded, he lost his soul. His lawyer urged him to take the deal. His family was torn. They just wanted the nightmare to end. But Aaron, even in his broken state, could not bring himself to lie. He refused the deal. The trial was set for April 2013. The prosecutors, furious at his final refusal, made it clear they would seek the maximum. They would drag his friends and family to the stand. They would destroy him. Aaron was trapped. The system had left him with no good moves. Every path led to a kind of death, spiritual, financial, or physical. On January 11, 2013, just weeks after that final, impossible deal was rejected, Aaron Swartz chose the only exit he felt he had left. He hung himself in his Brooklyn apartment. He was 26.
Aaron's death was not a suicide. It was a murder by bureaucracy. The silence that followed his death was short-lived. It was replaced by a roar, a collective, global howl of grief and white-hot rage. The internet community, the one he had helped build and then saved, knew exactly who was responsible. The anger was aimed squarely at the U.S. Attorney's Office and at Carmen Ortiz and Stephen Heineman. Lawrence Lessig, Aaron's mentor, wrote a scathing post titled "Prosecutor as Bully." He said, "Aaron Swartz is dead. A kid prosecutor builds his career by terrifying people and driving them to suicide. That is what Stephen Heineman is." The hacktivist group Anonymous crashed MIT's website, posting a tribute and a call to arms. "We call for this tragedy to be a basis for reform of computer crime laws and a renewed, relentless opposition to the surveillance state." The prosecutors, for the first time, were on the defensive. Carmen Ortiz's office released a statement defending their actions, a statement so tone-deaf and cold it only fueled the fire. It read, quote, "Stealing is stealing, whether you use a computer command or a crowbar, and whether you take documents, data, or dollars. It is wrong. This office's conduct was appropriate, unquote. Stealing is stealing, a crowbar or a computer command. They equated the quest for knowledge with a violent home invasion. This, in the end, was the unbridgeable gap. They saw a criminal. The world saw a hero. In the wake of his death, Aaron's work exploded into the public consciousness. His guerrilla open access manifesto, written years earlier, became his epitaph. Information is power, but like all power, there are those who want to keep it for themselves. We need to take information, wherever it is stored, make our copies, and share them with the world. We need to fight for guerrilla open access. His death became the catalyst for the very change he was trying to create. A bill was introduced in Congress to reform the CFAA. It was named Aaron's Law. It aims to remove the vague exceeding authorized access clause so that a simple terms of service violation can never again be treated as a 35-year felony. The fight for that law continues to this day. JSTOR, in response, immediately opened its archives to the public, making millions of articles free to read. Aaron's death was a tragedy, a horrific, needless waste of a singular mind. But his legacy is a fire that cannot be put out. He was a David who fought Goliath and was crushed for it. But his story, his sacrifice, has inspired an entire generation of new Davids. The Internet he fought for, an open, free, and democratic space for knowledge, is under constant attack, but the fight to protect it is stronger than ever, because of him. Aaron Swartz's story leaves us with the questions he spent his life trying to answer. What is the price of knowledge? What is the cost of justice? And what are we, the citizens of the Internet he helped build, willing to do to protect it?